Welcome to In Focus with Ijaz Haider. First off, a very happy Eid al-Azha to all the viewers. Let's begin this evening with what India continues to do in occupied and illegally annexed Kashmir. When leaders of 9 pro-India parties, loosely allied as People's Alliance for Gupka Declaration, met India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi, the expectation was that they would ask for a reversal of August 5th move and ask for some modicum of autonomy. The other important issue was demographic changes in occupied Kashmir. None of this really materialized. In fact, they came across as an ill-prepared and divisive bunch, desperately seeking relevance that continues to elude them. Modi's government, on the other hand, was prepared. As an eminent Kashmiri journalist, Iftikhar Gilani, noted in his analysis for Anadolu Agency, and I'm quoting from Mr. Gilani's write-up, India's Home Minister Amit Shah clearly spelled out to them a roadmap which in the order included undertaking an exercise of delimitation for assembly constituencies, conducting elections based on new demarcations, and allowing the new assembly to adopt a resolution requesting the Indian Parliament to return statehood to the region, unquote. 2 days ago, Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan warned India against making demographic changes and said Pakistan will agitate the issue at all international fora. Khan was speaking to a political rally in Mirpur, Azad Kashmir. The Indian oppression also continues at the socio-cultural and religious levels. The unelected bureaucracy that runs the illegally annexed Kashmir issued an order banning sacrifice on Eid al-Azha, but later retracted after the Kashmiri population reacted to it. To discuss where the PAD stands and what India's play is, I am joined by Iftikhar Gilani, who I just quoted, who is an eminent Kashmiri journalist and editor, planning and coordination at Anadolu Agency, Gaur Gilani, investigative journalist and author, Kashmir, Rage and Reason, who joins me from Srinagar, and Zafar Qureshi, chairman of Kashmir Campaign Global. Mr. Qureshi belongs to occupied Kashmir but lives in self-exile in London. So let's begin from ground zero, where we have Gaur Gilani. Mr. Gilani, give us a sense of this whole delimitation exercise, the consequences of this, the reason why Delhi is pushing for it, and whether the PAGD really has enough marrow in their decaying bones to be able to put up any resistance at all.
To begin with, as far as the People's Alliance for Gupka Declaration is concerned, we have to understand what their ideological background is and what they stand for. They are, in a way, like they're referred to as pro-India politicians in Kashmir. And largely, they want a resolution within the ambit and framework of the Indian Constitution. So anything that they will do will not be against the interests of New Delhi. So now what happened on August 5, as you know, that the semi-autonomous status and the statehood were taken away. So this bunch of pro-India political parties rallied together, and later 3 parties left them, deserted them, which included Sajad Loan's People's Conference or Congress Party, and also one more led by, this Shah Faisal's party, People's Movement. So once they went to Delhi, we have to also understand that a former spy master, Mr. Amarjit Singh Dulat, writes in his book that no chief minister in Jammu and Kashmir has survived or will survive if the guy or person does not enjoy Ashirwad of New Delhi, and he has to be or she has to be on the right side of New Delhi. So once they went there, the tone was apologetic. And they wanted to return to some kind of political framework and political power. And that's why they did not insist so much on the return of Article 370 and 35A, which forms the core of the debate. But they wanted some form of statehood, even if it were truncated, so that they could fight elections. And for that, the script is written in Delhi, and the acts will take place according to Delhi, and the characters will play their role. And this delimitation exercise, which is not happening in anywhere in India, but only specifically targeted for Kashmir, so as to take away the political centrality of the Kashmir Valley and make Jammu more relevant and create more seats for other, scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, and for the, and break the Muslim-dominated, constituencies, especially in Pir Panjal and the Chenab Valley, with already 4 assembly constituencies gone from the Ladakh region. So this is to pave the way for a Hindu chief minister and also do the fragmentation fragmentation in the Kashmir Valley, where the seats will be divided between National Conference, People's Democratic Party, People's Conference led by Sajjad Ghani Lone, and smaller parties like the Apni Party and the Kings, which is also known as the King's Party. So that is the plan. I think, you refer to the bone marrow. I think it's not about the spine also as much as it's about the political will. They always try to find their relevance in Delhi, and that's why they are referred to as Delhi's representatives in Kashmir and not the other way around. So that is the main difference. They will do whatever it takes to be on the right side of Delhi, and will accordingly for domestic consumption, and will make statements off and on. But more or less, as is my understanding after speaking to many of their leaders in both the camps, National Conference and PDP, barring few leaders, I interviewed one, Ruhullah Mehdi, for Deutsche Welle. I don't think there is enough resistance in or resilience that they are willing to show. They are wanting some kind of political power back to them, even if it is a truncated form or a truncated form of statehood. So that is what's happening on the ground.
Quick follow-up question before I go to Iftikhar Gilani. The scenario that you are painting, Gaur Gilani, appears to me to be a very carefully scripted one, and it's been scripted in Delhi. And I also get a sense that Delhi does not really want these two main parties, i.e. National Conference and PDP, to get the kind of seats that they used to, and which I believe is what you mean by fragmentation. So have smaller parties get small chunks of seats in order for Delhi to still be able to control events in occupied Kashmir.
So, Mr. Haider, absolutely, you got it right. If you remember 1999 or 2000, when the National Conference actually passed Autonomy Resolution in the J&K Assembly, Legislative Assembly, and later it was turned down and thrown into dustbin by the then NDA government, where Mr. L.K. Advani was the Deputy Prime Minister, and he also wrote that thing in the book that then Mr. Farooq Abdullah made a deal for his son, Omar Abdullah, who became MOS in Ministry of External Affairs, and in exchange of that, he did not push for autonomy any longer. And at that time, another political party in the name of People's Democratic Party was formed. So what happened? National Conference would get 40 or 45 assembly constituencies, majorly from Kashmir Valley and some parts in Pir Panjal and the Chenab Valley. So that what happened later in the subsequent elections from 2002, the seats, the Kashmir Valley seats, got divided between these two political parties. And now, if you see, from where our dear friend Mr. Iftikhar Gilani comes, that's the North Kashmir. If you see in North Kashmir, there is a party called Awami Ittihad Party led by Engineer Rashid. There's a party by Shah Faisal, which is called People's Movement, which is now being run by somebody else. And there's a party by Sajjad Lone, which is called People's Conference. And then there are also Congress Party, National Conference, and PDP, and the rest. So the aim is to further divide and further fragment, the political power through electoral process in Kashmir, while on the other hand consolidate the same in the Hindu-dominated regions of the Jammu province. So that is point number one. Point number two is what they have taken away since 47, and especially on the August 5, 2019. It's one gentleman gave an analogy that your clothes are being removed, your karakul, the cap, famous traditional cap of Kashmiris, and after that you are almost naked with undergarments. And now then the first demand is that you are being also made hungry. You want food and you want to put a shirt, and then it will be seen as some favor being done to you. So that is what they are doing. They are taking everything away from you and then saying that, look, now we will give you a shirt or we will give you your skull cap, and everything is done and dusted.
Right. I know you've expressed these sentiments before also, but thank you as always. That was Gaur Gilani speaking with us. Let me go to Iftikhar Gilani. Iftikhar Gilani, Gaur used the word truncated. It's interesting that your article, from where I quoted in my opening also, talks about truncated powers, and you say that even if statehood is restored, it will be with truncated powers, where law and order and the transfer of bureaucrats may remain in the domain of the central government. And therefore, most observers believe that J&K's chief minister, which used to hold the 7th rank under the official protocol list of the Indian government, will be pushed to rank 15. So, firstly, how much do you agree with what Gaur has said? Because Gaur is, as I said in my opening, he is at ground zero. And secondly, are you as pessimistic about the prognosis as Gaur seemed to be?
Absolutely, he is quite right. See the irony that these people, they were told on June 24th that the first delimitation of the delimitation new assembly will come under this new delimitation, and that assembly will recommend whether the state government, whether the statehood has to be restored or not. This is a proper procedure actually. It is actually procedure prevalent in every Indian state. Whenever any state wants a division, wants a state, Uttar Pradesh wanted a Uttarakhand or Bihar wanted a Jharkhand, so state assembly had to pass a resolution. Even the Telangana, when it came up from Andhra Pradesh, state assembly had to pass a resolution. That is okay. But when they bifurcated this Jammu and Kashmir, when they took away statehood from the Jammu and Kashmir, they didn't ask the assembly at that time. At that time, it was just the Indian Parliament which bifurcated the state. They didn't ask any resolution from the Jammu and Kashmir Assembly. Even in the Parliament, out of these 9 members of Parliament which Jammu and Kashmir had at that time, currently there is no member of Parliament in the upper house. Even out of those 5, one was actually arrested, held in Srinagar. Out of 8, 5 of them opposed that resolution. So in a sense that the majority of Jammu and Kashmir, even in a legislative way, have actually rejected that. So that itself, it's a fact. And now what I foresee, what is happening, the way this Delimitation Commission is going, it's actually accentuating its work because of the national conference who are absent, or it was not able to work because they are sitting in the proceedings. What they will do is that since there are around 90 seats, they will distribute 45 and 45 seats between Jammu and between Kashmir Valley. See the kind of the population of Kashmir Valley is 11 lakhs more than the Jammu, and they will get the equal number of seats, 45. They did the same thing in the district development committees as well, councils, that they distributed them 10 each to these regions, and they will distribute 45 seats in each. And then there are seats reserved for those scheduled castes. They will be distributed now. Earlier, these seats were only those seats where the scheduled castes had some majority, they were reserved. But now they will reserve the seats equally in Kashmir Valley as well as in Jammu. Even in Kashmir Valley, there are no scheduled castes. So, because it is a time-tested formula which is being applied elsewhere in India as well.
I just want some clarification. So, how will they have the scheduled caste seats in the valley when the valley doesn't have any scheduled castes? I mean, how would that work?
It doesn't matter. In Uttar Pradesh, there are many Muslim majority seats like Nagina, where the Muslims are some 45%, and that seat is reserved for the scheduled caste, where scheduled castes in that seat are not more than 18 or 20%. In another nearby seat where the scheduled castes are some 45% and Muslims are quite less, and that seat is not reserved. That's a general seat. This is a time-tested formula to keep the Muslim representation in check in elsewhere in India as well, and this formula will be tested in Kashmir Valley, Kashmir as well.
Right. So this is something that India already tested with reference to the Muslim communities in mainland India. That's a very interesting point. Let me pull in Zafar Qureshi here. Zafar Qureshi, as I said in my opening, you live in self-exile. You belong to occupied Kashmir. And, obviously you have your political activism. Now, you heard Gaur Gilani, you've heard Iftikhar Gilani. You also heard Gaur Gilani talk about the fact that nothing is likely to change on the ground. So my question to you is, A, how do you, clearly, you keep a very close watch on these developments. So what exactly is the diaspora doing, or what are the effective strategies that can, sort of bring pressure to bear on New Delhi with reference to the measures that it's trying to take?
Hi there, Saab. I really want to thank you for this opportunity. Firstly, as it's Eid, I wish all the viewers, the audience, Eid Mubarak. And just want to remind that while we're enjoying the religious freedom of celebrating Eid yesterday and today as Wednesday across the globe, our brothers and sisters in the occupied territory dream of that day. So let's not forget them in our prayers and on our Eid. And this is the crux, one of the crux of the issue of Kashmir is our rights. Okay? It's not just about the policies, as Governor Gilani said. Yes, we can, we have been for the last 73 years championing, and as Imran Khan Saab said in his speech a couple of days ago, educating the international masses and institutions about the issue of Kashmir. The reality is the issue of Kashmir has been there highlighted in the United Nations by India and Pakistan, as well as the international community. The 5 brasses of United Nations were there at that time among the other nations when the issue of Kashmir was raised and the dispute was formalized in the United Nations with an agreement between India and Pakistan that the people of Kashmir will be given the right of self-determination. Since then, a lot of resolutions have been passed. There's been a lot of education, a lot of policy changes have been tried on the international level. We see seminars, webinars, we see meetings with the top brasses of each, various countries. We've had many meetings in the European parliaments trying to garner that support and create a pressure. But the reality, as Governor Gilani said, nothing has really happened on the ground. The people of Kashmir are still under occupation. With every day, India is bringing more and more foot soldiers onto the land of Kashmir, changing our demography. Since 1947, over 450,000 Kashmiris have been martyred. In the last 30 years alone, over 110,000 have been martyred. And as you said, just since 2019, the demography of Kashmir has changed. And with, even though India retracted its ban on the bovine animals, that still has been enforced. And these are some of the techniques that India is trying to use to mold the Muslims of Kashmir and change that demography. Our religious freedom has been taken away. And at this point, as Governor Gilani said, very rightly said, Pakistan has got an important role to play. We need to realize the issue of Kashmir is not just about highlighting and educating the people across the globe or changing the policies and garnering their support. We need to take some practical steps on the ground because it is the physical occupation that is the issue. The will of the people of Kashmir.
Okay. So when you say we need to take some practical steps on the ground, what exactly are you calling for?
Even if nobody wants, a war with India or enemy. We as people of Kashmir have been under war since the last 73 years. Every day, tens of people are martyred in Kashmir. We don't want that. But what we do want is that Pakistan starts implementing and having a consistent policy on Kashmir. You cannot have double standards. On one side, you hold Kashmir as your jugular vein, and on the other side, you are looking to resume trade on the issues of Kashmir. You are looking to resume trade with India.
That's not happened, Mr. Qureshi. That was something which I personally wrote about and against it. There are lots of people who wrote about it. There was a bit of a bureaucratic confusion that afflicts most governments, not just the Pakistani government. And that entire thing was retracted. So I don't think there's any confusion with reference to where Pakistan stands. I think that position has been made very clear by various people, whether it's the Prime Minister of Pakistan, whether it's the National Security Advisor, whether it's the Foreign Minister, whether it's the Army Chief, that India has to create an enabling environment for any talks to take place, and enabling environment is defined as the reversal of those unilateral actions by India on 5th August 2019, which violate not only the UN resolutions, but also bilateral understandings between India and Pakistan. So there is absolutely no confusion on that count.
At the same time, there isn't a practical step taken. India has taken this issue and it has occupied the land. Pakistan We are Pakistanis, and Pakistan claims that Kashmir as a jugular vein. What have we taken physically as a practical steps to stop that physical occupation? We get bombarded every day by the militaries of...
Stopping physical occupation requires a physical response. Now, you've said yourself that war is not an option. So then, obviously, if war is not an option, because violence is ultimately, unfortunately, going to have, you're going to have more dead bodies in Kashmir, which is not something that, Kashmiris want, which is not something that Pakistan wants. So I agree with you, it's a tricky situation, but I think this is a situation where Pakistan has to calibrate its responses and make sure that there is a certain kind of cumulative, or a groundswell of opinion against what India is doing, and to try and make that work. It's not an easy situation at all. But let me go to Iftikhar Gilani. Iftikhar Gilani, again, you wrote something interesting here, which was with reference to the fact that the exercise of fresh demarcation of electoral boundaries will take place in the rest of India, will take place in 2026. And you also said that the commission, which was set up under former Supreme Court Judge Ranjana Desai in March 2020, to redraw the boundaries of provincial assembly seats in occupied Kashmir, along with northeastern states of Assam, Manipur, Arunachal Pradesh, and Nagaland. And the commission's term was extended for another year in March 2021, and suddenly the northeastern states were removed from its terms of reference, which means that it will now only demarcate the boundaries of occupied Kashmir. So, is this Delhi's way of, approaching the issue in a circuitous manner, giving an impression that it's not just about J&K, but then at the last moment turning it around and making it only, with reference to occupied Kashmir?
That's what happened when it was, when they just extended the term of this Delimitation Commission in March by another 1 year. So they dropped these northeastern states, and after that, when they dropped the reference in Assam, elections were also held with this old demographic, old demarcations. So they didn't insist on that. Assam went into elections as well, and it was only now actually when originally also when the Delimitation Commission was actually set up, at that time also it was quite obvious that it is only for Jammu and Kashmir. Otherwise, in the rest of the India, whole of the India in 2026, these new demarcations will take place. Why only singled out Jammu and Kashmir? If on the basis of this, now actually there are now I think they have an afterthought now, and many organizations who are actually giving the presentations before mostly the Hindu organizations, they don't want 2011 census now. They say that we will have a fresh census and then demarcate. That means that the fresh census, a new census, which will be taking place now the next year, 2021, because of the COVID, it got delayed. So they will do something with the census as well, because as per the 2011 census, Kashmir Valley has 6.5 million population and Jammu has 5.3 million population. Right. So as per populations, the Kashmir Valley should have more seats, as it was in the last assembly. Now the presentation given by the BJP in that before the Delimitation Commission was, no, geography should be made the criteria. Since Jammu has a more geography, I think it would be unique in anywhere in the world. If the geography is the criteria, then Delhi should not have just 7 Lok Sabha seats. Delhi has more population than Jammu and Kashmir, and has just and Ladakh, which has a very sparse population, so it's not now in the part. But as per if you go by the geography, the Ladakh should have the highest number of seats in that assembly.
Right.
If you can go
geography is never a mark for this. But, clearly from what Gaur Gilani said, from what Iftikhar Gilani is saying, or what Ms. Zafar Qureshi has said, the world has to understand that Pakistan and also Kashmiris, Pakistan and also the rest of the world is dealing with a right-wing RSS-dominated Hindutva government which has an agenda which wasn't written with Modi's coming to power. That RSS agenda has been written much earlier. It has manifested itself in many ways. A.G. Noorani is generally has a penchant for writing definitive books. And last year he wrote a book on RSS, which is again a definitive account of what kind of organization one is dealing with. Yesterday, we did this program with reference to the Pegasus project, which everyone knows how the Indian government was spying on judges, journalists, cabinet ministers, and the rest of it. So this is essentially an authoritarian, ideological, right-wing regime which has come to power in and through a ballot. But let's not forget that so did the Nazis in the Weimar Republic. So anyway, thank you so much to Mr. Zafar Qureshi. Thank you also to Iftikhar Gilani for his insights. We shall take a short break and return to discuss growing political instability in Lebanon. Stay with us. Welcome back to In Focus. Last Thursday, Lebanon Prime Minister designate Saad Hariri stepped down after failing to form a government for over the past 8 months. Hariri resigned following a brief meeting with President Michel Aoun. After the meeting, Hariri told the media, and I'm quoting from what he said, Aoun demanded some amendments which he considered essential and said, "We will not be able to reach an understanding with each other, and may God save this country," unquote. Aoun shot back by accusing Hariri of already deciding to step down prior to their meeting. Hariri rejected any amendments related to changes in ministries, their sectarian distribution, and the names associated with them, the president's office said in a statement. For his part, in an interview with Lebanon's Al Jadid TV, Hariri said he selected his candidates based on their expertise and their ability to reform the economy, but Aoun did not. I resigned in 2019 because I wanted a government of experts, and if we formed Michel Aoun's government, then the country won't be saved. This is what Hariri said. And then he went on to say the main problem of this country is Michel Aoun, who's allied with Hezbollah, who in turn protects him. This is the equation in the country, and if someone can't see it, then they are blind. Lebanon is also going through a major economic crisis. Reports say the lira has lost 90% of its value, effectively evaporating the savings of hundreds of thousands of families. At least half of the population has slipped into poverty, while food inflation is at more than 400%. To discuss what's going on, I'm joined by Hatum, who's a journalist and Middle East expert. And with her, I have Van Megadishian, a journalist based in Paris. Thank you to both of you. Let me begin with Leila here. Leila, quickly, with reference to the differences between the president and the prime minister, we know that the Constitution, under the Taif Agreement of '89, gives the president a lot of power. So, for our viewers, this is essentially Lebanon 101. So just walk us through what the differences are about and what the prognosis is.
All right, let me start with the issue of the Constitution. Following the Taif Accords agreement, basically that happened between political parties in Lebanon in 1990, the Constitution was amended. Actually, the president doesn't have vast powers. His powers were taken away. We used to have a presidential system. Now we have a parliamentary system where the president has lost most of his powers. However, one of his powers that remained was basically approving the formation of a new cabinet if the designated prime minister basically sets it out. The sad part is that in Lebanon, everybody throws it on the prime minister designated responsibility. You can hear from the statement that was made by the prime minister. He said, like, may God save the prime minister, may God save Lebanon. So they're throwing everything to God so God can fix it. should be fixing it. The main issue over here is not basically they're not agreeing on information. It's a sectarian issue. The Prime Minister designate who stepped down, Mr. Saad Hariri, had previously allowed the Shiites and the Sunnis to name their own ministers in his cabinet formation. But he wants to appoint the Christian ministers. This is what the president, who is also a Christian, refused. And he said, no, the Christians should name the Christian ministers. And they reached a deadlock over this situation. We heard the parliament speaker yesterday saying, one of his people said that the parliament speaker had proposed that we should put the names of the Christian ministers in a bowl and we just pick 2 of them, which is really hilarious. I mean, this is not how you fix the country. What we need at the moment is somebody who would take responsibility and step up to the position that they are appointed to and move fast because the country is drowning. Mr. Hariri wasted about 9 months of Lebanon's time, during which over 55% of the Lebanese are now under poverty line. They dropped under poverty line. We have a dire economic situation. We do have an inflation which had peaked through unprecedented levels, and yet nobody is willing to step up and live to the position that they have and help this country. This is so sad.
Right. Van, the problem is the way the Constitution was worked on consociational lines, instead of bringing the various sectarian fault lines and bridging them, they've actually deepened them. So the president has to be a Christian, the prime minister has to be Sunni, the speaker of parliament has to be Shia. So how do you look at it? I mean, is this actually a workable arrangement? And I'm not even talking about the fact that there is, in the form of Hezbollah, a near parallel government in Lebanon.
It's a very important question, I believe, this question regarding our political system that is based on the sectarian power sharing formula, etc. Because it is a timely discussion. So many political issues that ruled many countries in the world, like the West and the East divide, like the Soviet Union versus the European American system, the anti-imperialist, pro-imperialist movements. Even the Cubans are tired of these slogans. In Lebanon, unfortunately, the political system, these parties still thrive on these things. They live on actually accusing each other of being traitors. They live on accusing each other of being imperialists. The others accused the others about being Iranian agents. The Iranians, the others accused the rest of the political parties of traitors, etc. These parties have been thriving on this, but the key issue that they have been thriving on is these accusations of strife, that the other party is going to cause strife, and their wealth, their ability to harness money and make sure they have money so that they can win each election and divide the seats of the parliament according to their each political weight in the country.
Sorry, I'm sort of interrupting because I want to fast pace it. It's a short segment. So essentially, this is a kind of situation where one would assume that the politicians, instead of having the larger Lebanese interest in mind, will obviously push for individual and group interests, and so the fault lines, instead of getting bridged, will continue to deepen.
Of course. Just let me give you one example from yesterday. There was elections, nationwide elections for the Order of the Engineers and Architects of Lebanon. It is true that the size of it is not that big. Perhaps about 8,000 voters participated. But the opposition, the new opposition that came out of the October 17 uprising, won yesterday in a landslide, and we are now going to lead the Order of Engineers and Architects. Whereas the regime, the political parties that have been dominant in the country, I'm going to quote what I heard from one of the aides of the parliament speaker yesterday and one of the aides of the president, who said they lost because every time there was elections, they were fighting against each other, and after the elections, they were sitting down together and forming a government to share the resources and the money and embezzle the money of the state to enrich themselves. This is how they were working. So this is no longer workable. There is no money. There are no resources. There are no institutions that are working. There are no companies that are financing their politics. So basically now they have no money. If we go for elections today, before tomorrow, or in the next few months, this new opposition will be definitely going into parliament by force, maybe in small numbers, but we will win, because when they don't have money to buy votes for $50, these political parties have no momentum. They have no solution for the country's problems. Right. Yesterday's elections showed that.
Right. Now, that's something that we have established. Leila, the problem is that, politically there is a system which, in trying to represent all factions, has ended up factionalizing and fragmenting the country even more. So that's one problem, one irony, or one paradox, if you will. The other, of course, is the fact that the people are suffering. The European Union has threatened, Lebanon with sanctions, those entities, those politicians that are thwarting the formation of a government. So what is the prognosis here? Is there a silver lining somewhere here, or is this going to go worse?
There would be a silver lining if any of the politicians would wake up and smell the roses and actually confess that they have made mistakes over the past 3 decades to 4 decades and start acting upon it. Impose reforms, like basically agree to reach a common solution with the other parties and start rebuilding Lebanon or helping it out. The sad part is that, how I see it, the European Union, instead of helping the Lebanese population, it now is moving to put sanctions on politicians that they have enabled with their policies over the past 3 decades. It doesn't work. When you put sanctions on certain entities, they live in Lebanon, they have most of their money in cash stashed somewhere or basically sent to offshore companies that even the European Union can't reach. And they can still draw back on that money, and they don't need anybody. They have impunity. They have immunity over here in Lebanon. They cannot touch them. That's the sad part. Now, I disagree with Van. Van said that the political parties don't have money to pay. When push comes to shove, when tough times reach their own positions, they will pay money. They do have money for that. They will draw money, and they actually will pay $50 per vote during the parliamentary elections. For the small syndicate elections, they allow people to win so they can actually diffuse the anger.
So where do they get this money from? I mean, are we talking about graft? Are we talking about, another kind of embezzlement through government contracts? How exactly do they get this money?
Let me explain one thing. There are 2 ways to get that money. One, decades of thieving and basically stealing from Lebanon and putting their money elsewhere across the world in anonymous accounts under their sons' names, under their relatives' names, under basically a third party's name. And the other part is basically they are being financed, and let's not kid ourselves, by other countries, be it regional countries or international countries. When you come out and you see foreign embassies coming out and supporting one side, Arab embassies coming out and supporting another side, there are talks that basically some Arab countries and some American countries, even the Americans said, we put $10 billion in Lebanon. Where did that $10 billion go? Did they put it in programs? We didn't see these programs. We didn't see people being financed to do better in this country. No, we didn't see big infrastructure or industrial programs. No, we just saw politicians getting fatter, like their pockets getting fatter, and they don't care about the people.
Okay.
So let's not kid ourselves.
Okay. Leila, let me take this one. Leila seems to think, unlike you, what you said, these guys' coffers are not empty. I mean, they can get money when they want to get money. So that's one thing. Secondly, if everyone knows what goes on, what exactly is the way out of this, whatever morass or whatever quicksand, or call it what you will?
The way out of this is that when all these leaders, similar to Prime Minister Saad Hariri, they all leave. There are three major leaders who are the heads of state of Lebanon. The Prime Minister, who is the designate, who just resigned. He used to have a big political weight. And 3 days ago, in a nationwide broadcasted interview, he said, "I used to be a billionaire and I lost all of my money for Lebanon and I have nothing anymore." This is the son of the billionaire tycoon, the late former Prime Minister Rafiq Hariri, who used to be a much better businessman and much better policymaker. The last time Lebanon had a public policy, whether we agree with it or not, it was back when Prime Minister Rafiq Hariri was in power, before he got assassinated. So that was the last time, 15 years ago. They have money and they have done nothing. Saad Hariri, the Prime Minister who just resigned again, he also lost his money because of corruption. Most of the political parties are trying to fulfill the needs of their supporters by giving out cards that could help the people or the families to buy rice and olive oil every month. Even those cards are not working anymore. The money is drying up so fast. The banking sector's collapse has impacted so much that it is going out of control and everybody is running for his life. The politicians can't even go out of their homes anymore. There is one living in a bunker, the rest are living in their walled up castles in the country. So these guys are going to run for their lives, and at some point, either in the street or through elections, and I really hope through elections. And I agree with you and Leila that they might have money somewhere that they stole before and they can take it out again and use it. But the circumstances today show that won't be easy anymore.
So you're basically saying that things are fast to a head. The space for them to try and remain relevant, the space for them to try and, perhaps deceive people, that space is now gone. So let me get the final word from Leila, because I have to wrap up the segment also. So Leila, Van seems to think that either through other means, which he wishes it doesn't come to that, or through an election, people are going to speak up, and this Enshore regime, if you will, is not going to last, because now things have reached a point where there's no space left for this.
We do hope, actually, that people would speak up and change this regime as fast as possible. We cannot sustain living in such a bubble that has created not only the third world's worst crisis during the past century, but the idea is that wishes are one thing and reality is another. So long the political parties are in control of the parliament, they will put their own electoral law that people will have to vote based according to it. Now, what we are waiting for is people who, during voting, would vote with conscience rather than voting for their political parties or sectarian parties that usually used to feed them over the past 3 decades. And they have not only fed them with money, but also they have fed them with lies about other sects. So they have created an atmosphere of fear between people. Like, this sect will kill you if you don't vote for us. The other sect will take over Lebanon and decision-making if you don't vote for us. And that's a sad part. So we need to change the regime by amending the constitution. This can only happen via electing a parliament that has a majority of people who are new blood or people who have conscience to save this country. And
once
I'm
again,
not holding my breath, but I do hope.
That's all about hope, Frank, and let's hope that hope is not hopeless. I suspect that we'll probably have to revisit what's happening in Lebanon, and unfortunately for all the wrong reasons. But thank you, Leila Hatoum. Thank you, Van Megadishian, for your insights. This is all from In Focus this week. We shall see you next Monday at the same time. Keep following our latest updates on social media at indus.news. Good night and goodbye.